technology and digital transformation. We must ensure that innovation serves development and human dignity. We welcome efforts to implement the Global Digital Compact and to harness technology, including AI, in ways that reduce rather than widen global divides. Fourth, water is a strategic priority. Water lies at the heart of climate resilience, food and energy security, health and sustainable development. The pathway to the 2026 UN Water Conference offers a concrete opportunity to move from commitments to delivery. Later this month, a high-level prep meeting in Dakar will launch this process. It will be followed by a high-level event in New York on the 19th of March 2026, marking World Water Day. And from 25th to 28th May 2026, Tajikistan will host in Dushanbe the fourth high-level International Conference on Water Action Decade. This conference will be an important milestone of the Dushanbe water process in 2026 and a major substantive contribution to the UN 2026 Water Conference. From Dakar to New York, from Dushanbe to UAE, this sequence is designed not for statements, but for delivery and bringing forward solutions, mobilizing partnerships. Madam President, the Pact for the Future, the UN 80 initiatives, our collective commitments will only matter if they change realities.
I thank the distinguished representative of Tajikistan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
中方感谢古特雷斯秘书长所作通报。当今世界变乱交织，联合国面临严峻挑战，国际形势越是复杂，越要维护联合国权威和地位，维护联合国在国际事务中的核心作用。中方高度赞赏古特雷斯秘书长9年来领导联合国取得的成绩，支持秘书长继续完成好各项工作。我愿强调3点：第一，要坚定维护联合国宪章宗旨和原则，主权平等，不干涉内政，和平解决争端，在国际关系中不使用或威胁使用武力等原则，是宪章的根本要义，是处理国际关系的根本遵循，也是国际和平与安全的基石。联合国要坚决捍卫2战胜利成果，维护战后国际秩序，坚决反对单边主义和霸权主义，坚决反对军国主义复燃。第二，要平衡推进3大支柱，和平与安全、发展、人权3大支柱相辅相成，不可偏废。对于全球南方国家，发展问题更是重中之重，必须始终置于国际议程的核心地位。联合国要增强紧迫感，推动会员国落实2030年可持续发展议程，弥合南北鸿沟、数字鸿沟，实现共同发展、合作共赢。第三，要改革完善全球治理。联合国的价值在于维护全体会员国的共同利益，支持联合国与时俱进、提质增效，推动构建更加公正合理的全球治理体系，是广大会员国的普遍期待，也是中国倡议成立全球治理之友小组的初衷。中方支持秘书长推进联合国80周年改革倡议所作努力，期待改革取得积极成果，凝聚团结合作，为联合国和多边主义注入信心和动力。和平与发展是需要争取的，也是需要维护的。中方愿同各方一道，坚定支持多边主义和以联合国为核心的国际体系，维护和平，促进发展，推动构建人类命运共同体。谢谢主席女士。
I thank the distinguished representative of China. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Poland, followed by Portugal and Japan.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Secretary General. Aligning with the statement of the European Union, I would like to thank the Secretary General for presenting priorities for 2026. Let me express Poland's appreciation for your service and assurance of full support in the final year of your mandate. And Poland shows this support not in words but in deeds. We have paid our contribution for 2026 in full and in advance. We fully agree with the SG that at the core of our priorities must be the unwavering commitment to upholding the principles of the UN Charter and international law. In today's complex and volatile global environment, it is essential that the United Nations remains fit for purpose and capable of responding effectively to the emerging challenges. And the UN Charter is our anchor in the sea of chaos, as you described the world of today. In that context, let me quote the last Friday's address by the Pope Leo XIV to the members of the diplomatic corps, and I quote, "Efforts are needed to ensure that the United Nations not only reflects the situation of today's world rather than that of the post-war period, but it is also more focused and efficient in pursuing policies aimed at the unity of the human family instead of ideologies." And I agree with that quotation. We echo this call and support the UN reform to renew strong and effective multilateralism firmly rooted in the UN Charter. Peace and security, based on sovereignty and territorial integrity of all member states, brutally attacked by ongoing wars like Russia's aggression against Ukraine, human rights based on universality, and sustainable development based on solidarity with people and planet. All three pillars must remain equally important. Fulfilling ambitious goals needs not only genuine leadership, but also a renewed collective determination among the UN members. This determination will be needed, first and foremost, to undertake responsible actions to advance UN reform. Poland appreciates Secretary General Guterres' UN 18 initiative and the Pact for the Future. It is up to us, the member states, to deliver a positive outcome that will streamline the activities of the UN. Poland strongly supports multilateralism and reaffirms its commitment to the United Nations and to the Secretary General, particularly in the efforts to reform the organization so that it's fit for today's realities and challenges. But finally, this organization is what we, member states, make it of it. So less hypocrisy and more commitment. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Poland. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Portugal.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Secretary General, we thank you for your briefing on priorities for 2026, and we fully support the three principles you have outlined. As you mentioned, this is a demanding moment for the United Nations. The world is marked by prolonged conflicts, by growing inequalities, by the climate emergency, and by rapidly evolving technological challenges. But it is also a moment of responsibility, a moment to translate bold commitments into action and to choose cooperation over fragmentation. Mr. Secretary General, as you enter the final year of your mandate, Portugal wishes to express its deep appreciation for your principled, courageous, and steadfast leadership, a leadership grounded in the UN Charter, in international law, and in a strong commitment to multilateralism, even when it is under severe strain. The report on the work of the UN in 2025 reflects an organization under pressure, but also an organization that continues to delivering life-saving humanitarian assistance, supporting mediation and peace-building efforts, defending human rights, and advancing concrete reforms to strengthen the UN's effectiveness, including in the areas of digital governance and the responsible use of AI. Looking ahead to 2026, the priority should be implementation, turning agreed frameworks into results, strengthening prevention and peace building, adapting peace operations to today's realities, working towards charter-based and sustainable peace in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and around the world. Mr. Secretary General, your drive for reforms reflected in the UN 80 process is therefore particularly important, and we need to ensure that the UN is fit for purpose in a rapidly changing world. And this should also ensure that our institutions reflect today's world and not the world of 1945. None of these priorities can be achieved without a UN that is adequately resourced to deliver on its mandates. In this regard, my country is proud to be on the honor roll of member states that meet their financial obligations in full and on time. Portugal will continue to support the UN's efforts in a spirit of responsibility, of dialogue, and of service to the wider membership, including if elected to the Security Council next June. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Portugal. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan, followed by Liechtenstein and Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you, Madam President. I also thank Secretary General Guterres for sharing his priorities for 2026. Japan fully supports the SG's vision for a more effective and resilient United Nations during these complex times. The year 2026 is historically significant for Japan, marking 70 years since our admission to the United Nations in 1956. Over these decades, Japan has consistently demonstrated its unwavering commitment to the UN and adhered the principles of the UN Charter, evolving into a proactive contributor to international peace, security, and prosperity. As we celebrate this milestone amidst global uncertainty, we reaffirm our consistent and robust determination to sustain the international order based on the rule of law and support the UN works. The UN faces unprecedented challenges. I commend Secretary General Guterres for his endeavor, particularly through the UN 80 initiative. UN reform cannot be realized without firmest commitment and concrete actions taken by the whole UN system. Japan will actively engage in further works to find a way forward. Madam President, for the UN to remain relevant in today's dire geopolitical reality, Japan continues to advocate for urgent reform of the Security Council. The Council must be transformed through expanding its permanent and non-permanent categories, and we must move forward text-based negotiations as soon as possible. Equally important is our progress toward the 2030 Agenda. Japan will accelerate its efforts to achieve SDGs, including through the lens of human security. To ensure no one is left behind, stronger cooperation is necessary in traditional areas such as poverty and health, as well as new challenges including AI and digital technologies, while tackling issues related to financing for development. Lastly, as we approach the selection of the next Secretary General, its process must be conducted with the highest level of transparency, inclusivity, and predictability, to ensure broad support to the next leader in this challenging time. Japan is ready to work with all member states and the Secretary General to make 2026 a year of decisive action and renewed hope. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein.
And we want to thank the SG for his briefing and wish him all the best as he enters the final year of service to our organization. We're also grateful that he has found positive words on a few things, and I want to echo in particular his words that this disruption can be a force of construction, I do believe, and I hope that we can look at the moment that we find ourselves as a moment of opportunity and of resilience. And that is necessary because, as you have said yesterday, Madam President, more than ever, this is a make it or break it moment for our organization. And I just want to offer comments on two topics discussed this morning. The first is UN 80. We were certainly pleased to see that we were able to adopt the budget after much difficulty at the end of 2025 as a positive contribution on the discussions under work stream 1. This, of course, is not a reason to congratulate ourselves. This is simply what we need to do to keep the organization going. And of course, it is not a decision that has solved the liquidity crisis. We are confident that work stream 2 is on a good track. We have a clear calendar and a time frame, and we look forward to concrete results that will have a direct impact on the future work of this organization, but it will also take time of the results of these outcomes to play out, which is why it's so important that we now turn to work stream 3 in more detail to examine the potential structural changes to the UN system, which is what will make a difference in the long term and which we need in order to convince our political leaderships that they continue to make the investment that we see in this organization. We share the concern that you've expressed, Secretary General, concerning the state of international law. The United Nations, more than anything else, stands for the rule of law, the importance of international law, and the fact that it is agreed rules that govern international relations. Violations of Article 2.4 in particular are proliferating, and no state should get a free pass in the violation of the UN Charter. We certainly look for your leadership in calling out such violations, but it is in fact our collective responsibility of member states to continue referencing the importance of international law in order to keep this as the foundation of our organization. I thank you so much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kyrgyzstan, followed by Egypt and Morocco.
Madam President, we thank the Secretary General for his briefing and for outlining his priorities for 2026. Kyrgyzstan supports a strong, effective and action-oriented United Nations capable of responding for today's complex and interlinked global challenges. As my President emphasized in his statement at the 18th session of the United Nations General Assembly, the world is experiencing a profound crisis of trust in international relations, accompanied by growing geopolitical tensions, conflicts, and fragmentation. In this context, the role of United Nations as the central platform for dialogue and collective decision-making is more important than ever. Kyrgyzstan firmly believes that multilateralism based on the UN Charter, respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-interference in internal affairs must remain the cornerstone of international relations. There can be no sustainable peace or development without strict adherence to international law and without equal respect for all states, large and small. Peace and security remain at the top of our shared agenda. Kyrgyzstan consistently advocates for the peaceful resolution of conflicts through dialogue and diplomacy. Kyrgyzstan, together with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, has jointly presented a draft resolution on the peaceful settlement of border disputes. We count on the support of the member states. We thank all delegations for their attention to the remarkable progress achieved in Central Asian countries in peacefully resolving long-standing border disputes, which was also highlighted during the meeting of Peacebuilding Commission last December. Mr. Secretary General, Kyrgyzstan also aligns itself with your emphasis on reforming and strengthening the UN system and the work under the UN-80 initiative. Allow me gently recall the importance of fairness and inclusivity in the work of the Security Council. We all speak about justice, equality, and the importance of hearing the voices of all states, including small and developing. Yes, these principles must be reflected in practice, especially in the functioning of the Council. The credibility and effectiveness of the Council depend on its ability to reflect the diversity of UN members. Countries that have never had opportunity to serve on the Council should be given a fair chance to contribute to its work, and the voices of small and developing states must be heard. Madam President, the future of United Nations depends on our collective political will to strengthen unity, restore trust, and act responsibly for the benefit of present and future generations. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kyrgyzstan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Secretary General, for the inspiring statement. Egypt appreciates your leadership. We align ourselves with the statements delivered by the G77 in China and the African Group. The UN system is predicated on the conviction that multilateralism provides a foundation for global stability and that the reliance on the protection provided by international law would prevail over that sought through the use of force. Violations of international law, including by permanent members of the Security Council, weaken the authority of the Charter and threaten the very foundation of multilateralism. Yet, despite this bleak outlook, I want to offer a note of cautious optimism. This moment of crisis and uncertainty is an opportunity for middle powers and small states to assume leadership in defending international law and sustaining multilateral diplomacy. Through coalition building, norm setting, and principled engagement within the UN, these stakeholders can and should demonstrate that multilateralism does not depend solely on the will, whim, or restraint of the most powerful. In this connection, the UN is indeed empowered with a set of tools to mediate, manage, and resolve conflict, build and sustain peace, as well as advance economic and social development and protect human rights. The future of the UN will be shaped by the collective resolve of its broader membership to sharpen and modernize the existing tools and to introduce new ones that are capable of addressing the emerging challenges and opportunities. The successful adoption of the Pact for the Future in 2024 offered a glimpse of hope in this respect. On the outlook for the organization in 2026, I wish to underscore the following. 2025 has just concluded with adopting a regular budget that is significantly lower than last year's. This comes in response to the UN 80 initiative to strengthen effectiveness, coordination, and accountability across the UN system. The majority of member states have bought into this effort with the understanding that a leaner UN will be more capable of delivering mandates and enhancing impact. We must be mindful not to practically reduce this process into a mere cost-cutting exercise. As we further engage on the three work streams of the UN 80 initiative, we need to be more vigilant, responsible, and forward-looking. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Egypt. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Morocco, followed by France and Saudi Arabia.
Merci Madame la Présidente. J'ai l'honneur de lire cette déclaration au nom de mon ambassadeur qui regrette de ne pas pouvoir la prononcer en raison de sa présidence d'une réunion parallèle. Monsieur le secrétaire général, le Royaume du Maroc voudrait vous exprimer ses sincères félicitations pour l'exposé exhaustif que vous avez bien voulu décliner devant nous ce matin. L'année 2026 doit être celle de la consolidation de l'action collective et du renforcement effectif du multilatéralisme face aux défis multiples et successifs que connaît notre monde. Elle doit marquer le passage des engagements pris, notamment lors des grandes réunions de 2025, aux résultats concrets et mesurables sur le terrain, et soutenir les initiatives qui nous rapprochent et nous unissent. À cet égard, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, votre leadership et votre vision lucide seront déterminants pour guider nos efforts communs en 2026. Dans cet esprit, je voudrais souligner 5 points. Premièrement, le Maroc soutient vos efforts visant à renforcer l'efficacité, la cohérence et la capacité d'action de l'organisation, notamment ceux portés par votre initiative ONU 80. 2. Face aux nouvelles réalités et aux défis évolutifs auxquels sont confrontées les opérations de maintien de la paix, le Maroc, en tant que pays contributeur de troupes traditionnelles et majeures, réaffirme le rôle central des opérations de maintien de la paix de l'ONU et attend avec intérêt les résultats de l'examen en cours de l'ensemble des opérations de paix. 3. Dans un environnement de tension et de course à l'armement, la conférence d'examen du TNP en 2026 sera un moment de vérité. Le Maroc soutient une approche équilibrée renforçant les 3 piliers du traité et surtout la confiance entre États-parties, car sans confiance, aucun régime de sécurité collective ne tient. 4. Ma délégation souligne l'importance d'une gouvernance responsable de l'intelligence artificielle afin d'en maîtriser les risques et de réduire les fractures numériques. Enfin, mon pays soutient pleinement le rôle moteur des jeunes qui contribuent activement au développement durable, au rapprochement des sociétés et au renforcement de la paix. Pour conclure, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, le Maroc reste engagé pour une organisation plus crédible, plus efficace et surtout capable de délivrer ses mandats. Je vous remercie.
I thank the distinguished representative of Morocco. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of France.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je remercie tout d'abord Monsieur le Secrétaire général pour son exposé, dont la France partage l'inspiration, les constats et les conclusions. L'inspiration, c'est la pérennité de la charte et des buts en vue desquels elle a été adoptée il y a 80 ans. Ces buts correspondent à des aspirations universelles. Aspiration à un monde en paix, respectueux de la souveraineté des États, assurant à chacun la jouissance des droits fondamentaux de la personne humaine et garantissant les conditions écologiques, économiques et sociales adéquates. Aspiration à un monde où la force le cède au droit, où la compétition le cède à la coopération quand il s'agit de résoudre les questions fondamentales de notre temps. Les constats que vous faites, nous les partageons. Comme vous, nous constatons que la réalisation des buts de la Charte se trouve compromise quand prévalent la division et l'esprit de défiance. Quand des nations s'affranchissent des normes fondamentales encadrant le recours à la force, méconnaissent les droits fondamentaux de leur population ou s'exonèrent de l'effort collectif. Les Nations unies reposent sur la libre observance par les États des règles qu'ils élaborent ensemble. Il s'agit là d'une responsabilité qui nous oblige devant nos peuples. Appliquons le pacte pour l'avenir, atteignons les objectifs du développement durable. Enfin, les conclusions que vous tirez et les perspectives que vous tracez pour l'avenir recueillent notre acquiescement et notre soutien. Nous voulons une ONU forte et respectée, autant qu'efficace et engagée. Engagée pour la paix, le soulagement humanitaire, les droits de l'homme et le développement durable. Financée comme elle le doit, chacun payant à temps son dû. Nous soutenons la réforme que vous avez entreprise pour tenir compte de la nécessité sans transiger sur l'idéal. ONU 80 a connu un commencement de mise en œuvre avec l'adoption du budget par consensus en fin d'année dernière. Elle doit se poursuivre à l'échelle de tout le système des Nations unies. Ce système, fruit d'une longue sédimentation, a besoin d'une rationalisation. À l'heure où le manque de ressources oblige, par exemple, à hiérarchiser les souffrances humaines au nom de la priorisation des besoins humanitaires, il ne serait pas acceptable que les ressources ne soient pas employées au maximum de leur utilité. C'est aussi la condition pour que l'ONU soit en mesure de répondre aux défis contemporains, régulation du numérique et de l'intelligence artificielle, changement climatique, lutte contre le terrorisme ou le crime organisé. Monsieur le secrétaire général, alors que vous entrez dans la dernière année de votre mandat, la fermeté de vos convictions, la lucidité de vos constats et la résolution de vos actions continuent d'être inentamées et d'appeler de la part de la France
I thank the distinguished representative of France. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia, followed by Singapore and Tunisia.
السيد الرئيس مع الأمين العام، السيدات والسادة، بداية نرحب بعقد هذا الاجتماع ونعرب عن شكرنا الجزيل لمعالي الأمين العام على تقريره الشامل وعلى إحاطته القيمة بشأن أولوياته للعام 2026. كما نثمن جهودكم المخلصة خلال السنوات السابقة ونقدر قيادتكم الحكيمة في هذه المرحلة الحاسمة من عمل الأمم المتحدة والتي تأتي في لحظة تاريخية في ظل ذكراها 80. السيد الرئيس، تكتسب هذه الدورة أهمية خاصة إذ تتزامن مع إطلاق مبادرة الأمم المتحدة 80 والتي تمثل فرصة مناسبة لتقييم عمل المنظمة وتعزيز قدرتها على الاستجابة للتحديات الدولية المتسارعة. فالعالم اليوم يواجه تحديات غير مسبوقة للسلم والأمن الدوليين، بما في ذلك النزاعات الممتدة والتوترات الجيوسياسية والتي تهدد الاستقرار الإقليمي والعالمي. وهذه الحقائق تؤكد الحاجة إلى منظمة أممية مرنة وفعالة وقادرة على اتخاذ إجراءات فعالة وحاسمة. وفي هذا السياق فإن مبادرة الأمم المتحدة 80 تمثل أداة مهمة لتجديد وتقوية المنظمة وتعزيز قدرتها على الوقاية من النزاعات وعمليات الوساطة. فتعزيز الدبلوماسية الوقائية يظل أساسياً لمعالجة أسباب النزاعات وتقليل المعاناة الإنسانية وتعزيز الأمن والاستقرار على المستويين الإقليمي والعالمي. كما نود التأكيد على أهمية أن تظل هذه المبادرة قائمة على الشفافية والشمولية وبناء التوافق تقودها الدول الأعضاء، بما يضمن تعزيز العمل متعدد الأطراف وتحسين كفاءة المنظمة. ختاما السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، تجدد بلادي دعمها لمعالي الأمين العام، ونثمن حرصه على استمرار جهود الأمم المتحدة لتكون منظمة فعالة وقوية وقادرة على حماية السلم والأمن الدوليين وتحقيق الاستقرار والتنمية المستدامة لشعوب العالم. وشكرا.
I thank the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I thank the Secretary General for his remarks and for his steadfast leadership. We welcome the priorities that he has outlined for the year ahead, and we recognize and appreciate the Secretary General's commitment to keep working and keep pushing with urgency and determination. Madam President, a large majority of members of this Assembly, members of the United Nations, are small states. And for small states like Singapore, the multilateral system, anchored by the United Nations and founded on the principles of the UN Charter and international law, is indispensable for peace and security. In a world of chaos and conflict, every member state has a responsibility to stand up for international law and defend the principles of the UN Charter. We cannot allow violations of international law to become normal or to be normalized. As member states, we all also have a collective responsibility to work together to build understanding, to bridge our differences based on mutual respect and mutual trust. Singapore stands ready to work with all member states to strengthen the role of the United Nations and to defend multilateralism. Madam President, please allow me to make a few points. First, we need to accelerate reform and deliver results. We have made a good start with UN80, but we need to press on with this process. Just 2 weeks ago, we adopted a consensus budget for 2026 that led to significant reductions in the resource and staffing requirements, while also seeking to streamline and enhance our organization's efficiency. This is a concrete demonstration that the UN can adapt to challenges and deliver results. In this context, we underline our readiness to work with all member states to continue the UN80 process in a way that is beneficial to all of us collectively. Second, we need to accelerate the implementation of what we have already agreed, in particular the Sustainable Development Goals and the Pact of the Future. The Pact of the Future provides a very clear blueprint to make the UN future ready and to address the challenges posed by emerging technologies and to harness its potential in order to reduce inequalities between nations. Thirdly, as an organization, we need to communicate better and communicate differently. We need to make a positive case for multilateralism to people, especially young people around the world. There's far too much cynicism, and this needs to be changed. We look forward to working with you and your team and with all member states. I thank you very much for
I thank the distinguished representative of Singapore. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Tunisia, followed by Zimbabwe and Paraguay. Tunisia.
Secretary General, Your Excellencies, Tunisia welcomes this briefing and expresses its appreciation to the Secretary General for his continued leadership and for the clarity of the priorities he has outlined. We reaffirm our full support to his wishes and vision for a stronger, more responsive, and more effective United Nations. Tunisia attaches particular importance to the UN80 reform initiative. In this context, we stress the need to safeguard the development pillar of the United Nations. We also reaffirm our unwavering commitment to the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, the respect by all the members of international legitimacy and international law, and the importance of peacekeeping operations and preventive diplomacy, dialogue, and cooperation. The principles of non-aggression, sovereignty, and territorial integrity must remain the cornerstone of international relations instead of colonialism, genocides, and unilateral actions. Tunisia further underlines the urgent need to ensure predictable, adequate, and sustainable financing for the United Nations, as well as enhanced international efforts to finance development in line with national priorities. We reiterate our long-standing call for a comprehensive reform of the Security Council, including the correction of historical injustice through fair and permanent representation of Africa. Tunisia also values the role of the United Nations in supporting developing countries in stolen asset recovery and debt management. Finally, Tunisia expresses its hope that the forthcoming process for the election of a new Secretary General will reflect the organization's commitment to inclusivity and gender equality, and we encourage in this regard the selection of a woman Secretary General. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Tunisia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank the Secretary General for his candid and comprehensive briefing, which was both timely and illuminating. As we approach 2030, the international community stands at a defining crossroads. Progress on the Sustainable Development Goals remains slow and uneven, with reversals in key areas while the financing gap continues to widen. Accelerating implementation of the 2030 Agenda is therefore urgent. In this regard, we stress the importance of honoring all existing commitments, including those proposed under the SDG Stimulus Plan. While member states have committed to mobilizing financing for development through the Compromiso de Sevilla, debt distress continues to constrain the policy space of many developing countries. This underscores the urgent need for meaningful reform of the global financial architecture so that it reflects current realities and responds more equitably to the needs of the Global South. We welcome progress under the UN80 initiative and commend the Secretary General's commitment to transparency through regular reporting. We share the aspiration for a more efficient and responsive United Nations. At the same time, efficiency gains must not come at the expense of core mandates, particularly the development pillar. In this context, we reiterate our concern regarding proposals to phase out agencies that have been central to the development efforts in many countries, including UNAIDS. We also have a collective responsibility to safeguard our planet for present and future generations. The breach of the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold and accelerating sea level rise demand that we move decisively from pledges to action. For many countries, climate mitigation and adaptation are not abstract goals, but matters of food security, livelihoods, and survival. Developed countries must therefore fully honor their climate finance commitments. Finally, we support initiatives to promote universal and equitable access to technology, including emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, and look forward to constructive engagement in the global dialogue on AI governance. As I conclude, Madam President, the challenges before us are interconnected and demand renewed multilateral cooperation and collective resolve. In this context, the Pact for the Future is significant as it offers a pathway to restoring confidence in multilateralism. Working together despite our differences remains our most credible path to shared progress in sustainable development. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Zimbabwe. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Paraguay, followed by Mongolia and Pakistan.
Gracias, Presidenta. El Paraguay agradece al Secretario General por la presentación de su reporte anual y de sus prioridades para el 2026, las cuales orientarán la labor durante este periodo. Los países del sur global, los países en desarrollo sin litoral, como el Paraguay, los pequeños estados insulares y las pequeñas economías, enfrentamos de manera muy particular los desafíos estructurales actuales y crecientes. Las limitaciones de conectividad, las asimetrías en el acceso a mercados, la vulnerabilidad frente a shocks externos y las restricciones para movilizar recursos son grandes. Por ello, reiteramos la necesidad de seguir avanzando hacia un sistema internacional más inclusivo, eficaz y representativo, adecuado a las realidades de los países en desarrollo. Fortalecer la presencia y la voz de estos países en la toma de decisiones no es una cuestión de equidad, sino una cuestión indispensable para la legitimidad y efectividad de las respuestas colectivas a los diferentes desafíos globales. El secretario general Guterres, contamos con su compromiso con la organización y la cual esperamos se vea aún más fortalecida en este último año de su mandato. En un contexto internacional cambiante y complejo, el mundo necesita una ONU robusta, capaz de seguir defendiendo los principios consagrados en los 3 pilares de la Carta, sin necesidad alguna de priorizar ninguna de ellas, tarea para la cual seguimos contando con su conducción hasta el último día. En este contexto, resulta para nosotros fundamental subrayar la relevancia del proceso de selección del secretario general. Este momento constituye una oportunidad histórica para reflejar de manera concreta el compromiso de las Naciones Unidas con la diversidad regional. Paraguay apoya firmemente que el próximo secretario general o secretaria general sea la persona más idónea de América Latina y el Caribe, seleccionada sobre la base del mérito, la integridad y la capacidad de liderazgo mediante un proceso transparente. Por otra parte, secretario general, el Paraguay le felicita por su impulso en la iniciativa ONU 80 y, como lo hemos mencionado en otras oportunidades, pensamos que la reforma para mejorar la eficiencia operativa y reestructurar el sistema de Naciones Unidas para responder de manera más ágil a los desafíos actuales era sumamente necesaria y urgente, independientemente de la situación financiera de la organización. Por último, reiteramos nuestro compromiso con Naciones Unidas y el sistema multilateral. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Paraguay and now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mongolia.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, I would like to thank the Secretary General for his steadfast leadership and for sharing his priorities for the year of 2026. My delegation aligns itself with the statement made by Uruguay on the behalf of Group 77 and China. Excellencies, in 2025, during the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, we, member states, have once more realized the importance of standing together and working together to support and strengthen the United Nations, our beacon of hope for global peace and security and development. In this connection, today I would like to make 3 brief points. First, we commend the achievements outlined in the report of the Secretary General on the work of the organization. We see that the recent educational attainments, growth in digital connectivity, and bold climate actions, including support to renewable energy, need to be maintained for accelerating 2030 Agenda's implementation. Likewise, strides toward leaving no one behind, including measures on improving gender equality, youth involvement, development in Africa, and assistance to millions of refugees and displaced people through UN system have been remarkable in the last years. We truly appreciate the tangible results of SG's system-wide strategy on gender parity, which resulted in the achievement of gender parity among senior leadership, resident coordinators, as well as among professional and higher categories. Second, last year, important roadmaps were defined in several fields and sectors, including FFD4, UNOC3, LLDC3, and Second World Social Summit. Thus, we consider that it's important to integrate them well into implementation of the 2030 Agenda and Pact for the Future. Third, we welcome the key priorities and challenges that the Secretary General has identified today, and particularly appreciate concerns about global unrest and appeal to reducing security threats and conflicts. It should be underlined that we wholeheartedly support the Secretary General's UN 80 initiative. We expect that 2026 will be a turning point for the realization of the UN 80 initiative, which is aimed at making UN more agile, integrated, effective, and cost-efficient for the 21st century by reforming its operation, streamlining mandates, restructuring programs to better tackle complex global challenges, including conflict, climate change, and inequality. In support of the SDGs priorities in 2026 and the overall future of the UN, Mongolia reaffirms our commitment to be engaged more constructively in the future discussions and collaboration.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mongolia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan, followed by the Republic of Korea and Panama.
Thank you, President. I would like to commend the Secretary General for his leadership, clarity of vision, and strong commitment to UN and multilateralism. SG, you have rightly mentioned chaos and complexity of the challenges that confront us. And we agree with you that mutual trust and cooperation are most needed today, and that no one country or a select group can do it alone. Pakistan has supported you throughout, and we will stand by you and continue to strengthen your hands during the last year of your mandate. We appreciate your friendship, dynamism, and availability, as we also saw in your leadership in mobilizing international response to the 2022 floods in Pakistan. SG, we appreciate the principles and priorities that you have outlined and the passion with which you have sought to advance the 3 pillars of the UN. You also refer to the obligations of member states, from payment of contributions to respect for the Charter. And let me add that it is the duty of the member states to support the organization and to carry out its decisions and resolutions, to promote peaceful settlement of disputes and respect international obligations and treaties. You emphasize the need for reform, and we agree that it must strengthen and not weaken the organization, a reform away from status and privilege towards true sovereign equality, away from archaic concepts towards contemporary realities of democracy, representation, and accountability that must underpin global governance. And I concur here with the views expressed by the distinguished representative of Egypt regarding the important role of medium and small states in this regard. And that's why, Secretary General, we have been saying we want reform for all and privileges for none. Cooperative multilateralism through this organization, our United Nations, is the way forward. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Secretary General Guterres for presenting his annual priorities. The Republic of Korea aligns itself with this direction, which is firmly grounded in UN Charter and in multilateralism. Today, multilateralism is under serious threat. Yet we still believe that multilateralism remains irreplaceable in addressing global challenges. Under this backdrop, I'll make 3 points. First, 2026 must shift commitment to implementation. As the Secretary General has emphasized, what the international community does lack is not the arrangement, but delivery. Thus, it is critical to translate our shared commitment into concrete action across the UN's core pillars. This is essential for restoring trust in the UN and multilateralism. We support the Secretary General's emphasis on implementation, follow-up, and result. Second, UN reform is essential for enabling effective implementation. Across the UN United Nations system, delivery shortfalls reflect deeper challenges: fragmentation, inefficiencies, and coordination constraints. Our delegation welcomes the Secretary General's UN AD initiative as a practical effort for the UN to adapt and perform more effectively in a rapidly changing environment. Third, the leadership of the Secretary General is more critical than ever. Korea's experience on the Security Council reaffirmed that stability cannot endure without the consistent application of global norms and the rule of law. During this year of uncertainty, the Secretary General's moral authority and judgment are indispensable in defending the Charter and protecting multilateralism. In this context, we underscore that the significance of preserving the legitimacy, continuity, and effectiveness of the leadership, including a transparent and inclusive process for the selection of the next Secretary General. In closing, as my president stressed in this hall last September, Korea's experience over the past 80 years demonstrates that UN can deliver peace and prosperity, even as crises proliferate. The Republic of Korea looks forward to working with all member states to ensure the UN is people purpose for all over its next 80 years and beyond. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Panama, followed by Trinidad and Tobago and Mexico.
Señora Presidenta, señor Secretario General, Excelencias, Panamá agradece la presentación del informe anual del Secretario General 2025 y la exposición de sus prioridades para 2026. Mi delegación se adhiere a las declaraciones realizadas por el G77 y por el Grupo de Ideas Afines Países de Renta Media y agradece al Secretario General por su siempre atinada y responsable gestión. Reconocemos el valor de su informe como una guía esencial que nos recuerda que la dignidad humana debe permanecer en el centro de la acción colectiva de esta organización. En un momento en que resurgen tensiones geopolíticas, resulta esencial fortalecer los mecanismos multilaterales de diálogo, cooperación y prevención de conflictos. Panamá reitera que la paz y la estabilidad internacionales solo pueden sostenerse mediante el pleno respeto de los principios consagrados en la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Panamá coincide con el Secretario General en el fortalecimiento del multilateralismo es indispensable para responder a un entorno internacional marcado por crecientes tensiones, desigualdades persistentes y desafíos estructurales aún no resueltos. En este contexto, reafirmamos la centralidad de las Naciones Unidas como foro legítimo para promover el desarrollo sostenible, la cooperación internacional, el respeto a los derechos humanos y el derecho internacional. Como país marítimo rodeado por dos mares unidos por su canal, Panamá considera particularmente relevante lo señalado en el informe sobre la crisis hídrica mundial que afecta a más de 4.000 millones de personas. Para Panamá la seguridad hídrica trasciende lo ambiental y conecta directamente la salud, la economía, la logística, el ambiente y la cohesión social. En ese sentido, el Canal de Panamá, neutral, seguro y operado por panameños, cuya operación depende del uso responsable de agua fresca, continúa prestando servicios esenciales a la logística internacional y al comercio global. Señora Presidenta, la reforma de las Naciones Unidas y sus órganos, así como de la arquitectura financiera internacional, son fundamentales para avanzar hacia un sistema más equitativo e inclusivo. Panamá reafirma su firme apoyo a las Naciones Unidas y como hub regional del sistema, su disposición a seguir contribuyendo activamente al trabajo de la organización en beneficio de las generaciones presentes y futuras. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Panama. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Madam President. Trinidad and Tobago wishes to thank the Secretary General for his comprehensive briefing and for outlining the organization's priorities for 2026. It would also seem remiss of me not to also acknowledge you as President of this august body, the General Assembly, for your insightful presentation yesterday. Trinidad and Tobago fully supports the priorities identified, particularly the urgent need to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Progress remains far too slow, and the international community must redouble its efforts to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. In this regard, Trinidad and Tobago reiterates its strong support for reform of the global financial architecture to ensure a more equitable, responsive, and development-oriented system. My delegation also acknowledges the Pact for the Future and the UN 80 process and commends the co-chairs Jamaica and New Zealand of the informal ad hoc working group for their stewardship. We remain ready to support reforms aimed at strengthening this organization, one of the most consequential multilateral institutions, to ensure that the United Nations is more agile and fit for purpose to respond effectively to the present and future global challenges. Within the United Nations system, Trinidad and Tobago will continue to advance the agendas related to citizen security, the empowerment of women and girls, AI governance, food and energy security, sustainable development, and environmental resilience, as these issues remain central to our national priorities. In taking this opportunity to thank the Secretary General for his leadership and foresight as his term comes to a close, Trinidad and Tobago underscores the importance of a transparent, inclusive, and merit-based selection process that redounds in the appointment of the most suitable candidate for this critically important role of the next Secretary General at this pivotal moment. As we navigate an increasingly complex global landscape, my delegation stands ready to work constructively with all member states to advance our shared objectives and to strengthen this indispensable organization. We look forward to continued collaboration in shaping a more stable, fair, and sustainable world. I thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Trinidad and Tobago. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico, followed by Switzerland and Ukraine.
Excelencias, yo quisiera simplemente agradecer y felicitar al secretario general por haberse apartado un tanto del formato tradicional de estos informes y estas presentaciones de planes para el año en curso, para en cambio enfocarse en lo que constituyen los graves problemas que enfrenta el mundo en estos días. Creo que no estamos en un momento para respuestas convencionales, sino para acciones inusitadas, dada la gravedad de la situación internacional. Ojalá que la membresía de las Naciones Unidas, que todos quienes estamos representados en esta institución, hagamos eco y respondamos de manera acorde con la gravedad de los problemas que el secretario general sintetizó esta mañana. En cuanto a México, desde luego reafirmamos nuestro compromiso inquebrantable con el multilateralismo y con las Naciones Unidas. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Et j'aimerais tout d'abord vous remercier, vous, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, de votre leadership toujours orienté aux principes de la Charte et de la présentation de vos priorités de cette année. Et je voudrais surtout vous souhaiter pour cette dernière année qui sera riche en défis, santé et succès. Vous pouvez compter sur le soutien de mon pays, la Suisse, jusqu'au dernier jour de votre mandat. Et je voudrais aussi, au nom de la Suisse, exprimer notre reconnaissance à l'ensemble du personnel des Nations Unies. Ce fut une année difficile, mais leur travail donne de l'espoir. Ils réaffirment la confiance et la résilience face à des situations souvent plus difficiles que jamais. La Suisse rend hommage à leur courage, leur professionnalisme et leur engagement. Madame la Présidente, dans le contexte géopolitique actuel profondément polarisé et marqué par une remise en cause des règles communes, nous l'avons entendu ce matin, 3 priorités seront au cœur de l'engagement de la Suisse. Premièrement, le respect du droit international et de l'état de droit. Dans un monde interconnecté, Le droit international doit rester la boussole et le fondement des interactions entre États, du trafic aérien à la gouvernance numérique, au commerce, mais surtout aussi quant à la coopération pacifique. La Charte des Nations Unies demeure notre cadre commun. Elle n'est pas une option, mais une obligation. Elle doit être respectée dans son intégralité. Le pick and choose n'est ni admissible ni soutenable et comporte des risques majeurs pour la crédibilité et la stabilité de l'ordre international. Et ceci non seulement pour les pays petits ou de taille moyenne comme le mien, mais, l'histoire nous l'apprend, aussi pour toutes les puissances, grandes soient-elles. Il nous faut donc un retour clair et un engagement fort en faveur des principes, ainsi que des conséquences crédibles pour celles et ceux qui les violent. Deuxièmement, la réforme et le renforcement des Nations Unies, notamment à travers l'initiative ONU 80. La Suisse soutient depuis toujours un système onusien fort, efficace et efficient. Nous saluons votre initiative de réforme ONU 80, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, qui offre une occasion importante de façonner un multilatéralisme tourné vers l'avenir. Les réformes sont en effet nécessaires, elles doivent réduire la complexité, éviter les duplications et recentrer les entités afin de permettre à l'ONU de remplir pleinement ses mandats, de garantir des chaînes décisionnelles plus courtes et une meilleure utilisation des ressources et un impact renforcé sur le terrain. Vous pouvez donc compter sur notre soutien à la réforme. Troisièmement, la nécessité d'une coopération multilatérale transparente, inclusive et fondée sur la confiance. Les défis auxquels nous faisons face ne peuvent être résolus que collectivement. Nos populations attendent des résultats concrets. Elles attendent de nous que nous soyons à la hauteur de la promesse inscrite dès les premiers mots de la Charte. Et vous pouvez compter sur nous pour vous soutenir dans tous ces efforts. Je vous remercie.
I thank the distinguished representative of Switzerland. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ukraine, followed by Namibia, and the observer of the International Organization of la Francophonie.
Madam President, aligning with the statement of the European Union, I would like to thank the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, for your passionate speech and your priorities of the work that you have presented. I would also like to reject criticism of SG and the UN Secretariat that we just heard from the Russian delegation, including accusations of alleged bias. Such claims are absurd. There is only one truth, even if some do not like it. Secretary General, you have mentioned the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. It still remains the biggest challenge to international peace and security. We commend your constant condemnation of the atrocities that Russia keeps committing against the civilian population in Ukraine, especially these days when Russian missiles and drones have caused blackouts, leaving millions of Ukrainians without electricity, without water, without heat, under the freezing temperatures below 15 degrees Celsius. As the Security Council remains blocked by Russia cynically abusing its veto right, the role of the Secretary General becomes crucial in addressing the bloodiest war on the European continent since 1945. Wars of condemnation matter, but they are not sufficient. We need new actions, we need new deeds, we need new initiatives, even if such engagement is unwelcome to one of the parties. The UN cannot be just an observer, especially now when the mediation efforts of the United States of America are advancing. Secretary General Guterres has already demonstrated strong leadership, launching the Black Sea Grain Initiative to free Ukrainian ports from Russian Navy blockade and allowing us to export Ukrainian wheat to the global south to ensure food security and fight hunger. That was a truly courageous step. Now we would like to encourage you to continue this assertive approach and start new initiatives that would help us put an end to this barbaric Russian war. We would hope and we would welcome your leading role in returning to Ukraine our children forcefully abducted by Russia. The respective resolution was passed by this Assembly last month, and it has provided you with a strong mandate to act. It is in this spirit that we wish you that this final year of your office will be the most successful one, and we live a lasting mark on history. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ukraine. Before giving the floor to Namibia, I've seen India. If there's any other member state who wish to speak, please press the button now. Otherwise, we would come as a final speaker to the observer before I give the floor again to the Secretary General. So I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Namibia, followed by India.
Thank you, Madam President. Namibia would like to thank the Secretary General for his leadership and for his timely briefing on the work of the organization, and commits to cooperate with him as he implements his priorities during his last year in office. Being the child of international solidarity midwifed by the United Nations, Namibia subscribes to the principles of multilateralism as enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations and respect for international law. As our world grapples with interlocking global challenges, including heightened geopolitical tensions and pressing social and environmental issues, we are witnessing the expansion of very serious forms of types of unilateral actions which threaten the very existence of the United Nations. These actions violate the principles of sovereignty, sovereign equality, non-intervention, non-interference in internal affairs, and peaceful settlement of disputes. In order for the United Nations to remain fit for purpose, our focus should be on the UN 80 initiative to strengthen the United Nations system and to make it more strategic and responsive to global challenges as stipulated in the Pact for the Future. This should call for more accountability and collaboration in an integrated manner through the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks in supporting developing countries to achieve the 2030 agenda and address current and new emerging challenges to sustainable development through supporting national development priorities and policies. The UN reform should be geared towards addressing the needs of developing countries, including reforming the international financial architecture to make it more equitable, ensuring access to concessional funding and development to climate financing, and supporting regional frameworks for peace and security, amongst others. Let us be reminded that the UN remains the only suitable platform with a legitimate authority to collective action, and Namibia reiterates its unwavering commitment to the principles of the UN Charter and to the rules-based international order rooted in the principles of sovereign equality of states. Finally, Namibia aligns itself with the statements delivered by groups to which it belongs. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Namibia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of India, followed by the observer of the International Organization of La Francophonie, and by this, the speaking list is closed.
Madam President, Secretary General, and Excellencies, India thanks the Secretary General for outlining his priorities for the year. India particularly welcomes his commitment to make every day of 2026 count. As a member state that is firmly committed to multilateralism with United Nations at its core, India underscores that we stand fully ready to work alongside the Secretary General and his team as he pursues the 2026 vision. 2026 is a critical year for the United Nations. It faces several key challenges. The most significant one is the questions related to UN's efficacy, legitimacy, and credibility. These stem from the expectations of the world citizenry to deliver on each of the three key functions of the UN. The inability to purposefully intervene on UN's critical functions needs to be addressed on priority. Reformed multilateralism is essential to addressing the existing gaps. This is not a choice anymore. It is an imperative. The UN 80 initiative is a welcome step in this regard. India has pledged its full support and cooperation to this initiative. Member states must make full use of this opportunity. The UN membership must be guided by an ambitious vision on this front. It must not be limited to budgetary and financial aspects alone. Security Council reform is central to such vision. UNSC must reflect
contemporary geopolitical realities. Both permanent and non-permanent categories must be expanded. These timely changes are vital to making the UN fit for purpose and equip this organization to respond meaningfully to present and future challenges. This calls for member states coming together with a joint sense of purpose to work towards the larger good of humanity. Clearly, there is a need for member states to rise beyond their narrow considerations in order to achieve this. India once again reiterates its full readiness to contribute to this endeavor. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative of India. I now give the floor as the final speaker to the observer of the International Organization of la Francophonie.
Madame la Présidente, nous remercions le secrétaire général pour l'exposé de ses priorités qui intervient à un moment d'inflexion sans précédent pour les peuples du monde. L'année 2025 aura été une saison d'incertitude et le rapport du secrétaire général en dresse un constat aussi lucide qu'alarmant. Les valeurs partagées de dialogue et de respect du droit international n'ont jamais été aussi fragilisées et menacées. Ce contexte anxiogène fait redouter un basculement vers le chaos et interpelle la conscience universelle pour l'exigence et l'urgence d'un sursaut de ressaisissement et de réappropriation des valeurs qui fondent la Charte des Nations Unies. Il est évident qu'il n'y a pas d'alternative crédible au multilatéralisme. Ensemble, nous avons d'inestimables atouts pour saisir les opportunités et relever les défis qui se dressent à l'humanité, qu'il s'agisse de menaces sécuritaires, de périls humanitaires ou climatiques, ou encore d'enjeux énergétiques, de développement durable ou de prospérité partagée. Nous devons sans plus tarder renouer avec l'esprit de coopération et de solidarité pour un renouveau du multilatéralisme dans le cadre d'une organisation des Nations Unies ancrée dans son temps, ajustée à ses ressources et résolument tournée vers les peuples du monde. Les Nations Unies pourront compter sur le partenariat avec l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie dans la mise en œuvre des priorités énoncées par le secrétaire général. Notre cadre de coopération actualisé au mois de septembre 2025 en sera une légitime boussole, notamment dans les domaines où notre action requiert une synergie. Dans cette dynamique, nous poursuivons notre accompagnement au processus politique dans les pays francophones et notre assistance technique aux États en transition ainsi que notre appui à la contextualisation des opérations de paix. Nous serons mobilisés dans la réponse à l'urgence climatique et environnementale. Madame la Présidente, notre engagement repose sur la ferme conviction que le dialogue est plus équitable et plus productif lorsqu'il est inclusif. Le multilinguisme, en tant que vecteur d'inclusion et d'intercompréhension, se révèle à cet égard comme un pont entre les nations, un moyen de réduire les malentendus qui sédimentent les tensions géopolitiques et les murs de fragmentation. L'OIF se tiendra comme partenaire de solutions pour répondre aux défis rencontrés dans la mise en œuvre du régime linguistique et de diversité culturelle des Nations Unies. L'OIF sera également engagé à la préparation opérationnelle des contingents chargés de rétablir la paix civile en Haïti.
Merci beaucoup. I thank the distinguished representative of the observer of the International Organization of la Francophonie. I now invite the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, to provide his observation on the interventions made by delegations.
Madam President, I'll be very brief to respect also the time allocated until the end of the session. To say, first of all, that I enormously appreciate the importance and the richness of this debate, from which I hope I will be able to extract safe guidance for my future action. On the other hand, I wanted to sincerely thank several of the observations by different delegations in support of what I'm trying to do. and to say in full humility that my only objective is to fulfill my duty to the UN, my duty to its members and their peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these clear last words. By this, I resume the 70th plenary meeting. And we will, no, I'm sorry, by this, the informal meeting of the plenary is now concluded. I thank to all of you sticking to the time, and I thank for the understanding for the microphone cutoffs. But by this, we could ensure that really everybody could speak within these 3 hours who wished to speak in a full room. And by closing now the informal meeting, we will resume to the 70th plenary meeting, which will be held at 3 p.m. in this hall. The informal meeting is adjourned. Have a good lunch break.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.